Good morning, everybody. And we've already had our warm-up conversation coming to Play Great in November. Welcome to those people who are logged in, and Lindsay Wright with Be Fit for Life will be managing those people that are signed in right now. And Lindsay, just for the group here, could you just let us know who's on remotely with us? Not quite yet? Okay, they will come when they come. As always, I have deep gratitude for this particular forum and the people that help make this gathering possible. Cheryl with your crew here at St. Peter's and Edmonton Catholic, and your fine technical assistance with Gary behind the headphones, thank you. Play Great as well, being staged but to share across the province. Also Edmonton Sport Council, and of course Be Fit for Life. And I feel like it's been a long time since I've been at a play meeting, and this particular topic I will repeat for everybody, those people who know my history. I am not a social scientist. I've been an exercise reproductive endocrinologist, and I remind myself every single day that at some point I feel like I have no business talking about this stuff. But since retirement, it has become incredibly compelling to look at the social emotional learning contributions to physical literacy and the potential power it has to really bring physical literacy to life in a way that we haven't yet seen. So I'm always grateful with our own check-in that we've had. The cross-sectoral and cross-organizational engagement is always wonderful. So what parts 1 and 2 of this, for those of you, I know many of you may not have been here for parts 1 or 2, nor having seen it. And to be quite honest, it's okay. I mean, we always kind of jump in and get going where we can get going. And so I'm going to give a super quick overview of where we've been with that. But what I also want to be able to do for you here this morning is my best attempt at modeling how some of the social emotional learning aspects can be integrated into every single place and time you might be with your participants. And I'm going to use the word participants globally, as whether they are a student in your classroom, whether they are an athlete, if you're as a coach, perhaps even if you're a parent, if you're in your community, a leader in your community. So I thought instead of going through all of the different nomenclatures, I would just say those participants, and they might even be adult learners. I also want to make it clear that I want to share a particular frustration which has been growing in me, is that I see the thirst and desire among those people who are in the trenches doing this work, and in general, the persistent lack of support from the system is the cause of my great sorrow and source of frustration. That there are these foolish assumptions that simply because you go to a professional development session, that you go to a workshop, that you go and get this extra training on your own time and on your own clock, that somehow magically you're going to come back into your place of work and it's going to happen magically. And without the support of your other colleagues, without the support of your leaders and decision makers, then I go to the Peter Drucker statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And until we start getting some of our system leaders behind this and valuing the time that you are putting into this, we are going to stay within these small rooms, although it's nice that it's busting at the seams, and we are going to feel good while we are together and go back to our workplace and not feel supported. So I'll put that soapbox away, but that's kind of where I'm burning right now and where I wish to contribute making some change around physical literacy. So I'm going to start with a bit of an exercise. And have we got anybody online yet, Linz?
The group from Calgary.
Awesome, awesome. Well, welcome to you guys in Calgary. It's been too long since I've seen you, but welcome to our room here in Edmonton. So this picture, I had the great fortune of being in late October in Kananaskis, Peter Lougheed Park. My husband and I have decided to make camping much more of our spare time. And honest to goodness, this was the view outside of our camper. Drop dead gorgeous. And I am so in love with nature. It just, there's all those kinds of things that it does for me that I always need to get out there. And so it dawned on me, I thought, what is it about sometimes when we're in a particular place that there are these feelings that emerge that, well, I mean, what is it? I mean, it brings me joy, but not that kind of bubbly, it's not like I'm doing cartwheels, but there's this deep joy, a sense of comfort, peace, and belonging. So what I want you to do just individually right now, and we're going to do it super quick, but within about 30 seconds, I want you to think about where was a place that most recently you've been that brought you joy, peace, or comfort. Just whatever comes to you. It doesn't have to be the best ever, but what's the one that comes to you most quickly? So 30 seconds. Everybody got it? Just any nods? Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is, with just someone right beside you, I want you to, and again, I'm going to give you about no more than about 20, 30 seconds each to pair off and share your place. And what I want you to do is think about what are some of the sensory pieces that emerged for you. For me in this place, yes, I mean, it was stunning visual eye candy, absolutely. There is something about when I smell mountain pine, it just, I don't know, there's this old brain part of me that just goes, yeah. And so, and without going into any more details, but share, okay? Someone close, and then just off you go, 30 seconds each. About 30 seconds left. Okay, so that example right there, when we talk about social emotional learning and getting dialed in, as much getting dialed into ourselves, oftentimes we always think about what's happening for the participant. Are we creating an environment that stokes their ability to reflect on their own social emotional learning? And we sometimes leave ourselves out of that equation. And a lot of what I'm about to present today is about keeping yourself in mind through this. And there's some very good evidence emerging that if we don't attend to some of our own social emotional competencies along the way, that our efforts to support others in their own growth in that journey is challenged. It's not what it could be. So this particular exercise is one of the ones where we ask individuals to tap into other of our sensory capabilities. And oftentimes in our fast-paced world, that we leave behind some of our senses around what do we hear? What have we actually smelled? Is there any kinesthetic or touch aspects to it? And this is where it can become highly directive. And it doesn't matter whether we're dealing with a 3-year-old to tell us what they smell, what do they feel, or if we're dealing with a 43-year-old. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? These are still cornerstones to getting in touch with some of these elements. The other ways in which they talk about instructional methods is that given more time with that same setup around a place that brings you joy and comfort, there's the idea of discussing it with a partner. You know, maybe some people would like to sit down with pen and paper and have a sketch. Or perhaps they would like to just write a story about it and reflect on how they were with written words, or pen in hand, or paintbrush. Some people would like to maybe even sing about it, you know, or hum. Is there a particular song that comes to mind? The whole dancing, or how you might move, how you might feel you want to move in those conditions. There's some now, especially with mobile devices, my goodness, taking a video of oneself having that experience. There's even apps now that make it super simple. And again, the whole idea of drawing and capturing in a way that one chooses is another way of refining some of those capabilities as well. So there's lots of seemingly very simple ignition points, and yet the way in which we can get the participant, and right now what I've asked you to do, is to engage in it yourself. And I often think sometimes as a longtime educator and having been a coach as well, if there was something that I could feel myself, then I had a much better sense of what I was asking others to do. And so often in our busy lives, we sometimes think, I have to have the next best lesson plan. I have to have the program ready to deliver to others. And so this part today is really talking about your own journey in this. So, the super quick review, parts 1 and 2, and again, are going to be literally a couple of slides each. And as in previous play meetings that we've had over this, all of the slides will be made available for you. And then, what do we mean by support for leaders? What's some of the growing evidence around why this is so necessary? And then finally, we're going to finish off with about, you know, what can we do to bring this to life? And I'm a huge advocate, as I say, these conversations are wonderful, and they really become most important, most viable when we leave here with an idea about how do we continue that conversation when we go back to our own workplace. So the first one, part 1, we tackled physical literacy. And slay me if you will, but I'm not showing Canada's International Consensus Statement because I've already revealed that I'm super fond of how Australia has tackled this. And I think it's a much simpler, I love their graphics. And so it talks about the 4 interconnected. That's almost equally important in the definition as to what the different elements are around the physical, psychological, social, and cognitive components. And being interconnected, you cannot cherry pick. You cannot be self-serving and go, ooh, I know a lot about those physical things, so I'm going to go out and deliver all those great FMS programs at the expense of including some of the cognitive, social, and psychological pieces. We do it in sport, we do it in schools, we do it most places where we teach and instruct to our comfort level. That is not physical literacy, and please don't kid yourself or others about that. And I'm not saying you do it all at once at exactly the same time, but when we meet our participants regularly and over time, this becomes part of your planning design with intention. So that was part 1. Part 2 was when we really started to get into what do we mean by these social emotional learning skills. And I've taken a lot from CASEL, the Coalition of Academic and Social Emotional Learning, out of the United States. It's 40, almost 50 years old in its making. And they have been the cornerstone of building evidence around what is this concept of social emotional learning and why is it important. Most of the evidence is emerging out of the education sector. And education, in particular in the US, is suffering terribly around youth not being prepared to lead an adult life. Pieces around juvenile justice problems, poverty, addictions, mental health woes, let alone the issues that arise when we are physically inactive. And so there has been this abandonment around growth and development of our young children into young adults, of this portion of their learning and growing and developing. So this is a wee bit tiny, but and you'll have all the links for this, but the 5 cornerstones then of social emotional learning, there is some variability about self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, self-management, and relationship skills. And within each of that, there is a little bucket of other elements that are included within that. Now, within social emotional learning in CASEL, they have been partnering with Harvard's Child Development Center. We have some fine connections as well with UBC and also their, I believe it's something about their Developing Child Center as well. So there is a fabulous consortium arising off the back of this work of CASEL. And what is a thing of beauty is that all of these other research institutes and some of the other organizations working within communities haven't tried to create their own version. They too have leaned on CASEL and has used their language to build on it. So there's this terrific partnership that is emerging. And as I say, coming out, most of the evidence emerging out of education, including out of school time. And so then that naturally leaks into the community. Again, can't cherry pick. There are a lot of integrations and interactions that occur here overlapping. And once again, I say it's not as if you're going to be attending to each and every one of these skills as we go through a single lesson, but there will also be this intention that you must make sure that your lessons are attending to these over time. There are some fabulous content pieces around, well, what does it actually look like in class for us to practice or learn about responsible decision making? There's a resource that I'm going to share with you that's just come out in late 2017, which is a direct reply to that question. We also talked about the whole integration of this is that this version of a tapestry or a woven piece is that as we list some, not all, but some of those social emotional learning skills, such as grit, self-management, growth mindset, social awareness, that they don't just deserve to come to life in school. It's about going to school and caring for somebody else and showing that you can make good decisions and demonstrate empathy and so on. No, it's not just in school, but you also want it to filter and be infused into other parts of that participant's life. And this is now a message that I want to echo back, is that this is also important for our own lives, not just as what we model for our children or our students or our athletes or the participant. This is again a checkpoint in time. Is a question that I sometimes ask, is that with the idea of self-management, and the idea is that if you're an educator or if you're a coach, if you think, well, I can't blow up and get really angry and let my emotions run amok in front of my students because they've made me angry, and yet we step out of that educator role or out of that coach role, and then we give ourselves permission to let our emotions run amok. That's an inconsistency. And I know many people might do that, but it disrupts the fabric of who you are. And so we're really trying to integrate the social emotional learning skills into each and every part of our life. Physical activity, when the body moves with a focus on some of these social emotional learning concepts, provide us some of the richest long-standing opportunities to really learn about what it is to be gritty, what it is around self-management. How many times when we're trying to physically do something, even if it's not attached to a specific sport, but simply do something at home, and we get frustrated. Well, what do we do with that? So again, that idea of human body movement is a terrific educator for us within these elements. Again, don't cherry pick. Don't think that these behaviors are only important in one place and not in other places in your life. So now, that's the opening review. This is the document. It's about 350 pages. It's online. They talk about it being a living resource because their intention is to constantly update it. Thing of beauty. They have had one of the most comprehensive dives into what are these social emotional learning skills, what do they look like, how to code for them. I'm gobsmacked by the depth and breadth of this resource. This is the website connection for it, and I'm going to again use in the back end of this presentation. I've airlifted, I've just done like a copy and paste of some of the key findings out of it, which is contained in this, because telling anybody to go and visit a 350-page report is like, yeah, right. So it's there for the cruising. However, I've sort of also taken the liberty of plucking some highlights into the back end of this presentation. So navigating SEL from the inside out. What comes out in this, and this is out of Kim Schonert-Reichel's work from UBC. She's a researcher out of the Faculty of Education at UBC, but deep and thick into the social emotional learning areas. And she's been investigating a lot about teacher preparation. What do we do for our to-be educators when they're at the university, at the college, being trained as an educator? And a lot of her work had come out actually as a Canadian researcher out of the US, and it's demonstrating, though, very similar findings in Canada, that most of our teachers are not prepared in this area around how to even monitor social emotional learning among their students, how to invoke improvement, awareness of social emotional learning. And what she has come up with is a framework. So she talks about 3 necessary components for social emotional learning. So and I want to remind you, even though this comes out of the education sector, imagine that this is in your workplace. So whether you come out of a sport arena, whether you come out of a recreation, whether you come out of community, it doesn't matter. The same 3 pillars exist. And these 3 components are shown here. First of all, what are the social emotional learning components of the students, of the participant? And that involves what are their skills that help them succeed and be present where they are. The second one is about that learning context. What is the environment that your participant comes? And this is looking at in order for learning and experiences, quality experiences to emerge, what is that environment like that is going to influence academic success, if it's at a school, athletic success, if it's in a sport, in recreation, if there's a camaraderie, community building, whatever those focus points are, what is it about the learning environment that they come to that enables that to happen? And then this last one, which is, again, for the sake of repetition, what are the social emotional learnings of the leader of that group, of the teacher, of the coach, of the instructor? And this then talks about teacher or in leader readiness and preparation. Many teachers and instructors report they don't know how to manage difficult situations within a classroom. And for some reason, that's a shock. Well, why would it be shocking if they've never been given any guideposts about how to manage that? And so this often attributes to where we worry about teacher stress and teacher attrition. And the very same things are emerging in other areas where we try to get people more engaged in physical activity. Is that if you can imagine the diversity of individuals that come to your lessons, to your programs and sessions, can you really attend to all of their needs? And what is your default approach when you run into a group, it could be just a small group, that really don't respond to your usual instructions? Are you equipped to deal with that? And unless we've been supported in that, we usually go through a series of trial and error. And teachers then, what's a common teacher reaction is that they've tried to go through their little toolkit about adjusting. What happens to that participant or participants in a class when things aren't going well? What's typically?
They either close the door, yeah, or shut down.
Send them out.
Send them out. And I mean, I know as a young student going through, it was a chance for me to recall like time in elementary school when I would get sent out of a classroom, and I felt awful. I mean, talk about what more clear message can you give to a young student, a young child, saying, "You don't belong here. Out you go." Just, I mean, talk about wearing it. And so, is that the fault? It is what it is, but I think it makes an incredibly strong call. We need to do a better job helping our teachers, helping our instructors, helping our coaches manage a diverse set of social emotional learning skills. So, that's the framework. Again, do not cherry pick. Do not cherry pick. What we do right now is we sometimes think that sending teachers out for special little, and I don't want it to sound dismissive, but to go out for professional development, and in absence of the learning context, in absence of the principal waiting for you to come back in and go, "How was it? What did you learn? What can I do to help you bring this rich stuff back into our school?" Are there any principals around there that might do that? Handful. Yeah. And that's good. And we want that handful to expand. Same thing. Jen, I know how often you come here from Tri-Leisure. And are there people, not to target anybody, but are the values around what you learn here, the little nuggets that you go, that might work back there. I think we can test the grounds with it. Same thing. And in the Community Federation League, in the city. I mean, and these are questions. These are not intended to sling arrows. But until we start asking the right questions, this good stuff is always going to stay stuck in a single room. What are the kinds of barriers? Well, I mean, barriers, I often feel like I've been chewing on my wrist for like 20 years on some of this stuff, and I'm done. Maybe it's because my hands have fallen off and I just have virtual wrists now. But so what are those challenges? But they have taken great earnest efforts to identify what these barriers are around implementation challenges, limited local buy-in, lack of financial, personnel, and structural resources, poor integration into educational practice. Again, these are coming in as leverage points. How many times people have talked about physical literacy in the education setting, thinking, well, that just belongs in your physical education class. At best, we might put it into recess. Where does it live within the other curricular subject areas? Same thing within all recreation centers, and sport, again, has its own storyline. So that poor integration across the board, low sustainability. But by identifying the barriers, we then have some anchor points around how do we know what type of intervention or new idea that we're implementing, is it making a difference? And that's another part, is how do we know anything we do is making a difference? Do professional development experiences, do coaching courses, does taking high five, does it make a difference for the participant? And don't fall victim, don't kid yourself by thinking simply because you've done the course that by osmosis all of that magic is going to appear within the participants and they're going to drink it up. We need to get better at making these kinds of changes easier to monitor. So they talk about within this navigating SEL about kernels of practice. A lot of the work that they're doing in the US, these are coming out of low income, low support kinds of communities. They do not have a lot of coin that goes around. And so they are talking about developing these little kernels. The kernels being that what you plant within the soil, and this can be the various, the kernels can come from teachers, the kernels can come from important adults, the kernels can come from parents and guardians, the kernels can come from coaches, and what they place into the child's capacity to grow. And so they've actually got a full document around this, what kinds of kernels, simple things. And Kim will like to hear this one about mindfulness. They often talk, one of the simplest pieces they use with young children is learning about their breathing. And it's not about learning how to breathe so much as can you pay attention to your breath. You're not trying to make your breath like anybody else's, but do you hear your breath? Can you feel your breath? Remember that experience right at the very beginning about being in a place and pulling in all senses. And this is something that even the youngest of the young, about do you feel your breath? And what does it feel like? And so these are simple little pieces that they have been able to employ with huge success and have kids simply take a moment. So before they start to become angry or engaged in a negative kind of way with their classmates or with others, this has been a huge success. So that's just one example. Oh, down here, and this is they talk about relationships are the soil in which children's social emotional learning skills grow. And I dare say, you know, like with most chronic disease that we suffer from, all of its origins take place in childhood. And I would say, same thing for these social emotional learning skills. Whatever seeds we sow in our childhood, man, they're going to be in full bloom when we're here as adults. And the lovely thing about it is we can recultivate it by dialing in some attention to it. So for, not surprising to some of you in this room, but I've been a huge advocate for relationships. And I'm not talking about squeaky clean BFFs where nothing goes wrong. I'm talking about honest relationships where we can actually have dialogues with one another, listen to each other, hear something. My greatest learning over time in doing a lot of this work is listening to other people that saying things that just want me to, you know, do a full throttle move. And over time, I've learned to pay attention to that and go, wow, that's clearly something I haven't heard before and something that really bothers me. And now what I'm able to do is recognize that, and I ask that person for more clarity. I'm part of it is, I don't often say this, but I'm so happy I have that skill set now, that I can listen. Many times when we hear somebody who says something different to our own liking or way of thinking, we might just go, and our dialogue inside is going, oh, that's never going to fly. Boy, are they out on cloud 9. So, relationships. I'm a huge proponent of high caliber relationships for getting this kind of work done. So, first and foremost, now I want to ask you, if you don't have buy-in to this kind of stuff, and we've only been chatting about this social emotional learning stuff, but pieces around relationship awareness, self-management, responsible decision making, and so on. If you do not think this is of value, you as an individual, then it won't make a difference in your life. It won't make a difference in you as a leader, an instructor, or coach. It has to start with a meaningfulness within you for it to make a difference. And, you know, do you think it makes a difference for you, and do you think it makes a difference for your participants? Well, here's a little bit about what we're learning from the literature. We know that personal and workplace stress impacts your own social emotional competencies. We're now developing a bigger body of literature to show that if you don't pay attention to your own social emotional learning baseline or landscape, then these are direct contributors towards your own personal burnout and attrition. And teacher dropout rates are much higher now than what they were 10 and 15 years ago. And this is across North America. This whole idea about stress contagion, I don't know if any of you were able to listen to Kim's video, the second one, where she talks about if you're feeling a little bit coming into your work, everybody in your room is also going to feel it's contagious. And they've done this through this sweet piece, coming back to my endocrinology, around taking salivary cortisol levels from those students. And so teachers that have higher reports of stress and self-report burnout, when they do these salivary measures of cortisol, they're uniformly higher in those kids compared to other teachers that have lower self-report. So again, it's one of those direct ones where it's like someone coming on, tapping on your back. Yeah? It's a reminder, you know, that you can't hide from some of this stuff. And it's not hidden from your participants. And so that contagious, it affects your relationships, the level of trust that you convey, and effective messaging. And I think trust is another part which is integral to relationships, is how much do you trust somebody who generally is always like around you, as opposed to someone who's less of that. And it's not like you take a blood test. And this is one of the hardest things I've had as that kind of hardcore quantitative researcher. And yet now we're finally starting to realize we can't ignore it. And the last one is that leader beliefs influence your instruction and relationships. So we've got, and as I say though, you can't fake this stuff. You know, it's unfortunately not, I mean, maybe in the beginning it's a bit like, you know, the Nike Just Do It. But if you don't pull it into your fiber after a while, I don't know. And that's kind of where I'm at, is that it's about earnest engagement. So, Kim comes out with, again, out of the video, quality learning experience. She talks about recipes. Her first one, nurture adults' well-being. Provide them appropriate support and training. So in your own workplace, do you feel that you matter more than the people that walk into your school? Do you feel that you are more important than the people that walk into your programs? Just a question. Ensure all children have an adult that knows their name and can support them. That you know that participant when they arrive for your program or beginning of school. You know kids don't always come in on an equal playing field. There might be kids that are coming from a home of strife. They might be kids coming in with lower income, without breakfast. Do you know that? Develop positive peer-to-peer relationships within your network, within your programs. Host routine community meetings so both children and participants can provide feedback. They're very, very capable of expressing how they feel. And involve parents and other adults in this community. It truly is a lovely community effort. And again, I want to bring back in the physical literacy part of this, is that as the body moves, we know that there is a much greater inclination of individuals to be much more expressive and in contact with those social emotional learning pieces. So, my last couple of things. This is a chance for you to reflect. And you don't need to do anything more other than put this through your mind hopper right now. 2 questions. And these are questions actually that have been validated on the back of Castle's work in partnership with this other group, Panorama Education. How confident are you that you can engage participants who typically are not motivated? And there's some choices there for you. And then think of a specific social emotional learning skill, whether you want to talk about relationship, social awareness, emotion awareness, emotion management, you know, one that might come to you, and it doesn't have to be neat and pretty in the words, but if you think of one, how confident are you that you can support your participants' growth and development in that? And I'm deliberately not asking for replies on this because not only might this be very new to you, but it's also quite personal. And I think because it is personal, we haven't yet groomed our own conversational muscle to come out and say, you know what, I know grit is really important, but I haven't got a clue how to, I kind of recognize it when I see it. But when I don't see it, I haven't got a clue how to manage it. I often think, well, maybe it's just something you're born with. And that makes me feel better, and so I just ignore that participant and think, well, I guess they're going to be a grit-free, gritless kind of life. I mean, so I examine my own dialogues, and those aren't comfortable to share right away. But I hope these become inner dialogues because this becomes pieces within it. So that's 2 questions. The last 2 have more to do with you thinking about your workplace, which is even more delicate, because I've already made it really clear that until we get some of our ecosystem players, our leaders and decision makers about the places that we work and others that make decisions on our behalf, until they come into these rooms and start buying into this, it'll be a long slog. So last 2 questions. In terms of social emotional learning in particular, how supportive has your workplace been of your growth as teacher, coach, instructor, leader? And then, oh, sorry, that was a boo-boo. That's meant to be your first choice. Not at all supportive, slightly supportive, somewhat supportive, quite supportive, extremely supportive. And then the last one. At your workplace, how valuable are the social emotional learning professional development opportunities? Not at all valuable, slightly, all the way up to extremely. So again, reflection moments. So without leaving you, and this is my last one here, is everything starts with a conversation. And it's a conversation not where you're coming in sort of where you're kind of ready to drop the gloves conversation and your mind is already made up, but about inquiring about how you might have answered that within your own workplace and how you can cultivate these conversations around these are the questions. So I know we're coming to the end of our recording right now for the group, but everybody has wherever they might be dialed in, and this is how I would like to wrap up our conversation, is with a little bit of a discussion around these questions. So, Linz, do we have any, maybe before we sign off, is everybody A-okay on the remote end? Yep. Okay. So, Gary, are we good to, all right. So we're done recording, and now, with your permission, and again, there's no arm twisting here, none whatsoever, but in laying out that platter, around the kinds of questions that are listed up here for you. I would like, have a conversation with whoever you want in this room. If you see somebody else in this room that you don't ever get a chance to have a chat with, go find them. And we'll do that, and then self-select the questions. And then if there, as well, if there are general questions that we want to bring back. So if we could have about 15 minutes for covering this, and then we'll bring it back into open space for general questions. Thank you, and thanks for tuning in.